Hello there, welcome to my look back at Season 1 of the Rockford Files. If you've been watching my individual episode reviews, I would hope it's because you're already familiar with the show. But if you're not, then worry not, as this will be a spoiler-free look at the first season of the show. So after watching this, go watch the first season, then watch my episode reviews. If you're completely unfamiliar with the show, then here's what you need to know. The Rockford Files is a TV show starring James Garner as Jim Rockford, a brilliant but quite lazy private investigator, who takes the jobs he does to pay the rent, and not much else. Sometimes not even the rent. He previously served 5 years in prison, but was pardoned. He easily makes friends and enemies, doesn't like fighting because he doesn't like getting hit, and tries but fails not to get involved with cases or women that are going to cause him trouble. He lives and works out of his mobile home on Malibu Beach and has regular visits from his dad, Rocky, played by Noah Beery Jr., who disapproves of his career and life choices. It's hard to go into much more detail than that because the plots of each episode are so varied and unique. Rockford investigates every sort of crime, with all sorts of different clients and villains, which makes for a really entertaining format that allows the flexibility not to be repetitive, but with enough familiar returning elements to feel comforting. I think it's fair to say that the first season of any show is a tricky prospect, even more so these days when even popular shows get cancelled after their first season, if the almighty algorithm deems it so. And this season has its ups and downs. I'm no fan of the pilot movie. It's much less grounded than the rest of the series. Jim is a little less fun and funny. It's all a little less cohesive, and while it does a good job of establishing most of the recurring cast, it doesn't quite have the same tone as the show would quickly establish. Also, the original actor playing Jim's father is just no Noah Beery Jr. But after getting off to, if you'll pardon the pun, a rocky start, it really goes from strength to strength. As an episodic show, there's no story arc that runs through the season, or some deep emotional problems that Jim Rockford has to reconcile by season's end, and yet there is connective tissue, with character development from all the recurring characters, and yet it never manages to alienate new viewers. Over the course of the season, we get to learn more about Jim's relationship with his father, and see how Rocky starts to grudgingly accept Jim's career choice. But the show also manages to establish this relationship anew in each episode, without ever getting repetitive, by giving us the same basic information in new and original ways. This is similarly done with Sergeant Dennis Becker, Jim's police connection, where we learn over time why he and Jim are friends, but also we're told in each episode who Dennis is. With Jim's lawyer, Beth Davenport, it's slightly different, as we are always reminded she is Jim's lawyer, but their previous romantic relationship isn't touched upon that often, and so it's only hinted at with their somewhat flirtatious dialogue.
Oh no.
Now, do you think that's going to stop me? You got a short memory.
Had the show come about after the success of Moonlighting in the 80s, you can bet the studio would have pushed for Jim and Beth to have a will they won't they dynamic, but thankfully that isn't present here, as it can become a millstone around a show's neck. Instead, we are shown that they had a relationship, but also why it didn't work, as they are two fiercely independent characters. Although Jim clearly loves Beth, even if he isn't in love with her. Finally, of the recurring characters, there's Angel, who is usually just established as being sleazy and cowardly, and that's often enough for him making it a surprise when he does the right thing. It's also shown, though, in subtler ways, why Jim still associates with his former inmate, despite all the trouble that Angel causes, partly out of his intense loyalty to his friends, whether they be an old army buddy, an old friend, or an old love interest, but also because in a lot of ways Jim and Angel are similar. Jim is equally keen on making money, willing to jump straight into a con, and has the same strong sense of self-preservation as Angel. But the difference between them is Rockford's strong moral code, meaning he will always choose to do what's right, whereas Angel always chooses to do what's easiest. The season itself is hugely inventive and cleverly uses a formula that never seems formulaic. By combining different elements in different ways in each episode, it really feels repetitive. By varying how Jim gets involved in a case, what the crime is, whether we see the criminal commit the crime, or who Jim's client is, gives an enormous amount of possibilities that can sometimes be lacking in a Murder of the Week crime show. It's a series about the detective rather than the detection, and I think there's a clue in the title of the show. The Rockford files don't refer to the files Jim keeps about his cases, but rather it refers to files about Jim Rockford. We aren't learning about his investigations, we're learning about him through his investigations. We find out about what kind of person he is, how he's willing to bend or break the law if necessary, his aversion to guns, despite or perhaps because of him being a veteran, his past and present love life, his intelligence and wit, and how he knows how to use which of his abilities and in which combination and when, and of course his friends and family. All of this is a case study of Jim Rockford, and what a brilliantly well-crafted character he is. The show also isn't afraid to tackle or challenge social issues of the day, by giving us well-written, strong female characters, likely down to having a number of female writers on the staff, tackling issues of police corruption and corporate corruption, exposing issues with governmental procedures, and pushing back against stereotypes. It gives the show a life beyond the time it was made, as these issues reoccur time after time. The season also happens to be packed with fantastic guest stars, from character actors to people who hadn't yet found fame to those coming towards the end of their career. It's a wide variety of actors all doing their absolute best work to craft believable mysteries. The backbone of the series, though, is James Garner, whose effortless charm and acting really carry the show above what it could have been with someone else in the role. By acting as co-producer, it also meant he was able to steer the show creatively by bringing in some fabulous talents and a diverse crew that was able to elevate every aspect of the production that above similar shows. Some episodes do suffer from the limitations of cameras and a TV production schedule, so can look sometimes a little bland or poorly shot in places, but it's never distractingly bad. It's a similar story with the plots of some episodes, which, if you really picked apart, you could probably drive Rocky's truck through some of the plot holes. But what a boring life it would be to focus on the minutiae when the show is much more than just the plot. And for me, there were no plot holes that ever took me out of the story. So I don't feel that looking at the show under a microscope really serves a useful purpose. I've thoroughly enjoyed my look back over the first season and enjoy the series more every time I watch it, as I'm always seeing something new. So I'm really looking forward to tackling Season 2, and I hope you'll join me for that. Although if you are planning to rewatch Season 1, I personally would avoid the pilot. That's just my preference though. Thank you. Goodbye.